The morning sunlight filtered softly through the small panes of the modest home, casting a warm glow over the sitting room. A young boy, just 12 years old, sat stiffly on a wooden chair, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. Across from him, a woman with flushed cheeks, a mix of excitement and hesitation in her demeanor, held up a book. "This," she said, pointing to the first letter on the page, "is the letter A." Her voice was gentle, like the murmur of a brook. The boy leaned forward, his keen eyes fixed on the page, absorbing every stroke and curve of the letters. "A," he repeated, the sound foreign, yet thrilling on his tongue. He felt a spark ignite within him, a glimmer of something profound and powerful, an understanding of the world that had been denied to him. The woman's fingers trembled slightly as she turned the page. She had never taught anyone before, let alone a young boy in his position. But there was something about him, his bright eyes, his unyielding curiosity, that compelled her. She couldn't ignore the instinct to share with him this simple, human knowledge. For weeks, their lessons continued in quiet moments when her husband was away at work. The boy's progress was astonishing. He devoured each new letter, each new word, like a man starving. The woman marveled at his hunger for knowledge, but she also began to feel the weight of what they were doing. At first, the lessons were straightforward, a teacher imparting knowledge to a willing pupil, but soon they became something more. The woman found herself captivated by the boy's questions, his insights, and his sheer determination. She realized that she was not merely teaching him letters. She was unlocking a mind of rare brilliance. She would often pause during their lessons, watching as he carefully traced letters on the slate or pieced together simple words from the page. His joy at each small triumph was infectious, and she could not help but smile, despite the quiet voice of caution in her mind. There were moments when she hesitated, wondering if she was doing the right thing. Her husband's stern warnings about the dangers of educating someone in his position echoed in her thoughts. But those doubts would vanish the moment the boy's eyes lit up with understanding. She began to see him, not as an other, but as a child, eager to learn and filled with potential. Teaching him became her small act of defiance against a world that sought to keep him in darkness. One afternoon, as the boy struggled to form the word freedom with chalk on a slate, the door swung open with a loud creak. Her husband stood in the doorway, his face darkening as he took in the scene. "What is this?" he thundered, his voice heavy with anger and disbelief. The woman jumped to her feet, clutching the book to her chest. "It's nothing. I was just..." "Teaching him to read?" The man's eyes narrowed. He turned to the boy, who stood frozen, the chalk still in his hand. "Do you know what you're doing, woman? Teaching someone like him to read? You'll ruin him. Knowledge unfits a child to be what he's supposed to be." The boy's heart raced as he absorbed the man's words. Unfits a child to be what he's supposed to be. The phrase echoed in his mind, a revelation that struck him like lightning. He felt his chest tighten with a new resolve, a burgeoning sense of defiance. The man grabbed the book from the woman's hands and threw it onto a high shelf, out of reach. "That's the end of it," he declared. "No more of this foolishness." From that day on, the woman's demeanor changed. Her once kind eyes grew hard, and her hands, which had gently guided the boys, now snatched away anything resembling reading material. She no longer spoke to him with warmth, and her gaze carried a weight of guilt and bitterness. But the damage was done. The seed had been planted. and the boy was determined to nurture it. His quest for knowledge soon became clandestine. Bread, a scarce and precious commodity, became his currency. He traded it with neighborhood boys who attended school, coaxing them to share their lessons or teach him the meaning of words he could not decipher on his own. He learned to feign casual curiosity while watching them write in the dirt, absorbing every stroke of the stick as if his life depended on it. When he was sent on errands to shops or warehouses, he would linger near the shipping manifests, pretending to study the symbols and numbers. On days when the streets were quiet, he prowled alleys and discarded bins, searching for scraps of newspapers or tattered pamphlets. Every fragment of text became a treasure, each line of print a step closer to unlocking the world's mysteries. One fateful day, he stumbled upon an old torn copy of the Columbian Orator in a pile of discarded belongings. Its pages, though worn, carried ideas that electrified his young mind. The essays and dialogues within the book introduced him to the concepts of justice, liberty, and equality. One dialogue in particular, between a master and a slave, captivated him. The slave's eloquence and reasoned argument earned his freedom, and the boy could not help but see himself mirrored in the story. "Knowledge is the pathway from slavery to freedom," he murmured, clutching the book tightly. Each turn of the page was a step toward understanding his own worth, his own potential, and the chains that bound him not just physically, but mentally. As he learned more, he began to question the institution of slavery itself. How could such cruelty and oppression persist in a world filled with reason and moral understanding? The boy's thoughts turned often to his mother, whose face he remembered only faintly. He learned to his astonishment that she too had been literate. The realization filled him with a bittersweet pride and a deeper connection to her memory. "I am quite willing," he thought, reflecting on her legacy, "and even happy to attribute any love of letters I possess, not to those who sought to oppress me, but to the native genius of my mother, a woman of strength and brilliance whose gifts were disparaged and unrecognized." One day, he vowed, he would honor her spirit by claiming the freedom she could only dream of. And when that day came, he would stand before the world as a man unbroken, unshackled, and undeniably free. At the end of that path, he would reclaim his name, Frederick Douglass.